Hey everyone, welcome to a Rouxbe live session here. My name is Barton Seaver. I am a chef, author, husband, father. I live on the ragged, jagged, delicious coast of Maine, where I'm joining you today in my home kitchen on an absolutely gorgeous, but also sort of, creepy day here in Maine. And that's 60 plus degrees here in November, the week before Thanksgiving. It shouldn't be that, but you know what? I'll take it because I'm a garlic farmer. I'm also a father of 2 young children, which means I don't get anything done in the time that I was hoping to get it done in. And I didn't get my garlic in the ground in time. And yet these warm days have allowed me to make up for that lost time. So here we are today, and that's something that I am very grateful for. It's a beautiful day here in November. Those of you who have joined me before know that I think that the most important ingredient in any meal that we make is gratitude, is love. Cooking is an act of love. It is an act of kindness. So I would ask of you to take a moment before the next thing you cook, and well, everything you cook, just to take one moment to say what you are grateful for, because you know what, it just makes everything better when we are happy with what we have in front of us. So that is particularly relevant to the topic at hand today, with the holidays coming up, time when we are endeared to give thanks for things, to be around the people that we love and honor, to cherish them, to honor them. So anyway, there we are. What else do I have to say? Well, it's been a long time since I've seen you. I used to do these quite regularly, but our schedule has dropped off there. I am still very busy with all things seafood, which is my beat. I am the chef instructor for the seafood literacy course here on Rouxbe, but have long been part of the family, and it's a wonderful reunion to be back today with Patrick Britton, who is the IT genius behind all of these live presentations and so much more at Rouxbe. So Patrick, nice to see you. And I already see that so many of my friends that love to join me in past months on these live events are back again. So it's nice to see you again, friends. So let's dive into it. I don't have anything to show you today other than just to answer questions. And the format of today's event is going to be, well, ask me whatever you want, right? And it can be about Thanksgiving. It can be about holidays. It can be about whatever you want it to be. If I don't have an answer, I'll point you in the direction of someone that does, or, well, we'll just figure it out together. So the way this works is over there to the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see your add question here box. Anything you want to ask, just type it right in there. If you scroll down, you'll see in that gray box below it, the questions that have already been asked. There's a little heart icon over there. You just click that little heart icon to vote that question up to the top to make sure that I get to it and that it's answered for you today. I do have a hard out at 3 o'clock, just after 3 o'clock my time over here on the East Coast. So I'll try and get to everything. So let's dive in. From Blanca M. Hi, friend. What are some of my favorite Thanksgiving dishes? Cool. You know what? I'm going to merge this question with Char. Hi, Char. It's nice to see you, friend. Char's question, which is next. What's my childhood favorite Thanksgiving dish that you still make in your own dinner party on Thanksgiving? Cool. So, a couple things here. I'm just going to start off. This is not a sob story, but rather, hey, this is a story of memoriam. My mom died when I was 17 years old. She was the one who really sort of drove the holidays around to our house. She took them very seriously and just prepared for them. She was the one that really sort of drove the traditions around it. For Thanksgiving, though, she didn't have many really traditional dishes that she did, but for the cranberry sauce, which was just a really unctuous, lovely thing of whole fresh cranberries simmered down. Let's see, she put in there walnuts, diced pears, orange zest, and a tiny little bit of chopped diced celery in there, along with brown sugar to add sort of a more nuanced sweetness to it to balance out the tartness of those cranberries. And so this was her cranberry relish. Every now and then she would take some, like a can of mandarin orange slices and throw that in there at the very end. But that's a dish, some iteration of that I make every Thanksgiving in memoriam of her. So that's one of my favorites. Another one is that I have a sort of a surrogate mother who was my mom's best friend, who took over many of those mothering roles when my mother passed. And Patsy, she was a very proper Southerner, and she made a dish of mashed sweet potatoes topped with brown sugar and some brown butter, some pecan pieces, and then on top of that, she would put some marshmallows, throw the whole thing under the broiler. It got all sizzly, sexy, crunchy, burned, sweet, bitter. Oh man, it was so good. So that's another thing that I do. So I do both of those things in memory of women that I love very much. And so isn't that kind of what we do around the holidays? We sort of invite the ghosts of our past, present, and future to hover close indeed around us. So other things that I like to do on Thanksgiving is I like to introduce some seafood, because I'm a seafood guy, and I cold smoke a side of salmon. And this is a 3 to 4 day process that I do. I get a whole side of fresh farmed salmon. I typically use a Norwegian salmon on this, coming from a sustainable source. I do a cure mix of 4 parts salt to 1 part brown sugar. I throw in there a whole bunch of mace, ground mace, onion powder, garlic powder. And if I'm feeling kind of spicy, I'll put in some dill or some ginger powder, fennel seeds, etc. And then I completely cover both sides of the salmon with that, and I let it sit for about 24 hours. Now, typically that's a lot more time than you would cold cure something. Then I learned how to do it when I was in restaurants, but here is something I figured out. In restaurants, I would put it into a walk-in, and walk-ins have big fans that blow air. So it's basically a convection cold oven in that way. And so it evaporated a lot of the moisture out of that salmon a lot quicker. And so I would only do it for like 12 hours at a restaurant, but in the refrigerator, I do it for about 24 hours. And then I wash the salmon off all that salt, pat it dry with paper towels, and then I douse it with Pernod or herb sant. And the reason why I do that is because I'm trying to dry off the surface of it. Now, can any of you think and quickly give me an answer to why, if I'm trying to dry off the surface of my salmon, would I drench it in alcohol? Anybody? Put your answer in down there at the bottom, and maybe Patrick can observe, see if anybody's got a good answer. So I'm going to hold off on that. So what I do is I drench it with that. I put it back in the walk-in for another day or so. And what that does is it dries out that surface, and it forms what's known as a pellicle, which is the sticky surface area to it. All the proteins that have been drawn out, those cells that have been slightly dehydrated by the salt, the wicking aspect of that. Well, those are now sticky. What's good about that? Well, it gives the smoke something to stick to, right? This is a very important thing, especially because we are cold smoking. I don't want to cook the salmon at all. We're going to cold smoke it to add flavor to it. So I get more sort of bang for my smoke buck in terms of the lower time frame when you add that on. What was I talking about? Anyway, so you get more sort of more smoke flavor for your buck, the lesser time that you put it in there, so the less danger you have of cooking it at all. So I like to do that. Let's see. Other things that I like to introduce are textures. So these are not so much dishes that I do here, Blanca, to your question, but whatever dishes that you're doing, add some texture to it. What is this meal other than a buffet, just ongoing buffet of so many different things, right? And what's going to keep it interesting? To me, it's colors. Try and always have a lot of different colors of things and textures. So I always try and add something crunchy, whether that's your jerky fried onions on top, whether it's adding pomegranate arils or seeds into a salad, or throw them on top of your brown sugar roasted sweet potatoes, anything like that. I use a lot of different nuts, from slivered walnuts slivered almonds that I will simmer in olive oil until they're golden brown and that oil is nutty and unctuous. And then I'll use that just as a dressing with maybe some lemon juice and sprinkle that on top of whatever, whether it's my roasted root vegetables, I'll sprinkle that on top. So you get this textural contrast and things. And guess what? It keeps it so interesting because bite after bite, you're coming back and there's that contrasting aspect to it. So I would do that. And then the last thing that I would say is fresh herbs, right? This is not a sort of the very traditional lineup of dishes. Tends not to use a lot of fresh herbs. Yeah, you've got sage in your stuffing recipe, maybe something like that. But big tufts of fresh herbs, even cilantro, parsley, chervil, some thin shredded sliced mint, things like that are wonderful in terms of adding freshness to a meal that's very well known for being heavy, right? But it adds this lightness, this brightness, this freshness to the whole meal that just makes it more palatable, more digestible to me, but also more interesting. So again, with that sweet potato dish, great. Throw a handful of cilantro stems on top. Will they wilt slightly? Yes, but this incredible, wonderful aromatic flavor will come into the whole dish, and it'll just promote more interest. Your gravy that you make, great. Throw in some chopped fresh herbs into there. So it's this wonderful, beautiful, sauce that nappes and thickens over everything, but adds that brightness. Really, chopped fresh parsley is great for that. So I see that Patrick knocked up to the top there, an answer from Melvin. Melvin, thank you very much. Your answer to why I drenched my smoked salmon in alcohol before trying to dry it. It's because alcohol lowers the evaporation temperature of water. This is why alcohol is particularly good in like fry batters if you're making them, because it evaporates the water faster. And what that does is, instead of like just putting water into your mix or seltzer water, you're putting in vodka, which evaporates faster, so you get less steam time and more crisping time. Same is true if you're trying to dry something off. By patting it or drenching it with alcohol, it sort of forces that issue. It helps to dehydrate the surface of that a little bit faster. So there you go. Melvin, nice, buddy. All right, so I've given you a lot of information. I probably touched on many of the other questions that are coming up, but let's go to Judith T. Hello, friend. Hello. It was nice to get your email from you earlier, just yesterday. And to her question, I'd like to serve fish for Thanksgiving. Any tips on creating a festive presentation? And it's nice to see you. Well, thanks, friend. So the dish, the recipe that I sent to her, and this is a recipe that I think I have somewhere online, but I just wrote it for a new publication, the next issue of Edible Maine magazine. And I'll try and share this out with you if I can find an older version online. But what I like to do is, if you've ever heard of porchetta, it is an Italian dish where it's pork loin or pork belly that has been marinated in garlic and rosemary, anchovies, fennel seeds, all sorts of stuff. I put in a lot of chili flake, and then it's rolled up and tied, and it's already in the skin. And so the skin gets crispy, crackling, crunchy on the outside, the inside tender and moist, super flavorful. You slice that thin, serve it with some mayonnaise and some grilled broccoli rabe on some ciabatta toast. It's like the best sandwich in the world. Anyway, I take inspiration from that and I make it in a salmon or in Arctic char, which is a small salmon type species. What I like about the char is that it's small enough so that it feeds my family of 4 for a couple of days, rather than a whole salmon, which would feed my whole family for a week plus. So what I do is I take a headed and tailed fish and I butterfly it. So here's the backbone of the fish. I come in through the belly side and I butterfly it along both sides of that backbone. Split it open. You take that backbone out. You now have the rib bones on either side. I'll slice those off very thinly, just right under those bones. Then I'll take out the pin bones, those little rib bones that run down the center of the fillet. And now I've got a boneless fillet that has been split open or butterflied. And then what I do is I take some of that fillet off of this skin so that I've got this flap of skin still attached. And I've got now these strips of meat that I cut into strips. And then I make a marinade. Fennel seeds, diced fresh fennel, tons and tons of garlic. I mentioned I'm a garlic farmer. I love me some garlic. Tons of garlic sauteed in olive oil. I'll throw in some almonds in there as well, chunked up or slivered. Tons of lemon zest, lemon juice, chili flake in there as well. Lots of fennel seeds, as I mentioned, and I'll make this whole paste out of this. I'll put in that lemon juice, lemon zest, etc. And once that cools down, I will marinate those strips and of that fillet in that, and then I'll place them all back in the skin and roll the whole thing up, tie it off like a roast, so it's beautiful and the same thickness all the way throughout. And then I'll roast that at a very low temperature, 275 degrees, until the internal temperature in the center reads about 130, which is cooked for fish. I'll take it out of the oven, and then I'll crank up the broiler super, super high. And when that oven is screaming hot, I'll drizzle the outside with olive oil on top of that skin, which is now nice and dried out. I'll put it back in until it is crackling, audibly crisp on the outside. I will take those bits of twine off in the roll, and you have this like beautiful roulade of this beautiful pink-colored flesh from the Arctic char or the salmon. And you slice down through it, and you get this wonderful crackling crispiness and texture of that. You get the texture of the marinade, those almonds on the inside, as well as that just beautiful ebullient flavor of that wonderful fennel and lemon and all that goodness. Slice that. Oh my gosh. Like, that is a fish centerpiece to be very proud of. It takes a day or so, but you know what? When cooking seafood, how often do you get a process dish like that, where you have time to really see to it, nurture it, love it, develop those flavors? And so that's something I really like. When I cook Thanksgiving, I take 3 days to cook. Why? Because I love it. I love the preparation of it. And so that idea that you get to really nurture a dish as you would with a stew, a long, slow braise, those kinds of things really call to me, especially this time of year when it gets cold. So there you go, Char. I'm sorry, Judith, for what I'm digging on these days. Wow, Patrick found. Did you find that? ediblemaine.com? Well, I think it's on there. So anyway, that edition is coming up, or that issue is coming out soon. So there you go, Judith. Appreciate you. From Chris E., another one of my absolute favorites. Hello, friend. Thanks for joining us again. May you and yours have a happy holiday season. Oh, we will. We will. My little Rosie boy, he's now 3. So Halloween, just this past couple of weeks ago, it was the first real holiday that he could really sort of fully participate in. So I've got a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. Rosie, he is 3 years old. Alden is 7. So this holiday season is just going to be absolutely magic, because at 3 he's really getting it and he can participate and he understands. He's already asking about Santa, and yeah, this is gold these years. Oh, I'm having so much fun with it. So thank you for your well wishes and your blessings. So days ahead of time. So dishes like that sweet potato, those roasted sweet potatoes, I really like that. Sweet potatoes are very resilient. They can handle heat. So you can make that a couple of days ahead of time and then just warm it through and put some cilantro on top of that. Maybe top it with a cilantro almond pesto. So you get that sweet, but also that savory, wonderful goodness of that aromatic cilantro coming through. That would be a really good one that you can prep ahead of time, just lightly warm up, or even serve just above room temperature is fine. Soups are a big one, of course, because soups improve with a little bit of age on them. So 2-3 days ahead of time, if you're making your butternut squash soup, great. That is just a simple reheat, obviously. So that's another great way another good dish to think about. You can have more than one soup too. 2 styles of butternut squash soup that I like. So I'll talk you through 2 of those. And I think I've done an episode, a Ruby Live around soups as well. So maybe Patrick could go back and find that, pull that up. But with butternut, one thing I really like to do is, yes, of course, there's the puree soup that we're all familiar with, right? And I made one of these the other day that I particularly loved, which I used some curry powder in. So I started off with butter, though you could use olive oil or any other oil, or just even dry toast this if you're trying to do an oil-free meal. So toasting some, now what did I do first? I deeply browned the butternut squash cubes So I gave them a good bit of color and a bunch of butter in the bottom of a thick, heavy bottom pan. And when those got very nice and colored, deep and rich, caramelized, I added some onions on top of that, cooked those, a little bit of roasted garlic, and then I added some curry powder, some apple cider to the mix, and then a whole bunch of water, and just simmered that down, some salt. And when I pureed it, what I loved is how mature the sweetness of it was, because by caramelizing the squash ahead of time, what you get is just, as I said, sort of a more evolved, a more mature sweetness, but also sort of a more evolved depth of flavor to it. And in this way, I don't use any stock in the soup. Why? Because there's so much flavor in that squash. But something else that I do in my pureed sort of sweet vegetable soups. Hi, you ready for this one? Angostura bitters, right? Cocktail bitters. You very likely have this in your liquor cabinet, right? Or on your bar. We've all seen these, right? Hey, it's been around forever, right? And we use them in cocktails. Why? To bring flavors into balance, to bring sweet and aromatic with just a touch of bitter into balance, right? That's what makes food really good, is when it tastes in balance. So use it in your cocktails. Why can't you use it in your butternut squash soup? It performs the exact same function, does the exact same thing, and the results are magnificent. Just a few dashes of this. You don't need to go overboard. It's not really an ingredient so much as it's a flavor adjustment. The same way that adding a little bit of salt, it's not really an ingredient, but it's something that needs to be in there. Think about this in that same way. It brings sweet into balance in a way that just brings it into focus. And makes it less one-dimensional, and really just, it brings it to life, really, and makes the flavors of the soup, of the squash, that much brighter. So try that, folks. Another thing I like to do with the butternut squash is I'll have a very flavorful broth, whether it's chicken broth or roasted vegetable broth, something of the season. I will take chunks of butternut squash. I will take chunks diced fennel, about the same size as sort of 1-inch cubes of butternut, diced fennel in the same way, and then a little bit of very, very finely diced onion. Heavy bottom pot, sear off those chunks of butternut squash just to give them color on one side, just to elevate the flavor and add some depth and nuance to it. Take that out of the pan, saute your fennel, your onion, add in some fennel seeds. And I'm a huge fan of fennel seeds. I buy fennel seeds by the bag, by the pound. That's how many of them I use. And I go through about 3 pounds of fennel seeds a year. Handful of fennel seeds, toast those off in whatever fat you're using, butter, olive oil. I use olive oil for this. Throw in a bunch of slivered almonds as well. Okay, so you're toasting this down. You add back your butternut squash, add in your broth, season with salt, and simmer it until your butternut squash chunks are just barely soft. You don't want them falling apart. You want them soft, because this is a brothy soup. We're not going to puree this at all. So this is sort of stewed butternut squash, if you will, with this rich amount of broth around it. And it's just a very interesting way to serve a soup that people are very familiar with. But then you also get the texture of those sort of braised almonds in there. Those fennel seeds plump up a little bit and just add some texture and so much beautiful flavor. And then the 3 different textures of the onions, the fennel, and the butternut, the beautiful colors of that as well. Throw on some chopped fresh herbs. Some mint is really, really particularly good on this, mixed with some chopped fresh parsley, drizzle of olive oil. Woo! There you go. And that soup gets even particularly better if it sits for a couple of days. So, Chris, this is coming back to your question of a couple of days in advance. So that's another one that I really like. Patrick put on the link for the Hearty Soups event that I did, and a cold soups event. So both of those are there over on the right-hand side. And then, Chris, one other thing that I would say is components for salads, especially, rustic, robust autumn salads. So you've got your roasted root vegetables, some radicchio or maybe some red Belgian endive sliced into nice little strands. get some nice citrus. Citrus is coming out right now. It's really beautiful. Blood oranges, grapefruit, Meyer lemons. Make segments out of that, and then make a nice hearty herb almond vinaigrette. You see, I'm always going back to the nuts, right? Texture makes it all good. So make a vinaigrette out of some chopped fresh parsley, some mint, some slivered almonds, sliced almonds, olive oil. Sherry vinegar is particularly good with this. And so you have all these components made ahead of time. This is going to be a room temperature salad. You've got roasted root vegetables, whatever melange of those you want. Roast those off a day ahead of time. Keep them on the countertop. Follow food safety protocol at all times to maintain the safety and healthfulness of your food is the official line. What I do is roast them off a day ahead of time and just leave them on the countertop because, well, I've done it enough times to know that for my family, that is how I choose to do it. I can't recommend that necessarily for you, but that's what I do. So you've got your roasted root veg, you've got your lettuces, you've got your segmented citrus, and your vinaigrette. And there you go. All right. Throw in some arugula and you are golden. So these are dishes where you can do all of the prep ahead of time and that really are served at their peak when you mix them day of. There you go, Chris. Hey, I appreciate you. Hope you got some inspiration from that. Julia G, hello. Please advise on what is best made ahead. Pies, stuffing, gravy, potatoes. Well, we just talked about that. I think your gravy, that's a great idea. Gravy is super easy to make. If you're roasting a turkey, though, you want to do that day of. So you're going to have the drippings that come off of that. But more often than not, there's not enough drippings to make all the gravy you're talking about. So you're probably using some stock. Make your gravy the day ahead of time, right? And just bring it back to a simmer and then pour in all the drippings that you want. And there you go. And in terms of using the turkey fat in order to make your roux, in order to thicken your gravy, if that's how you do it, honestly, rendered fat from a high temperature oven is not really that great for us. It changes the molecular composition of the fat. And yeah, it's not really good for our arteries. I mean, we're doing this once a year, so it's the dose that makes the poison. I don't think once a year is the problem. But if you want to make your gravy ahead of time, because that's always kind of the last thing, right? You're trying to get everything to the table and you're like, oh, I just pulled out the turkey. Now I got to make the gravy. Like, take that burden off yourself. Make your gravy ahead of time and then take whatever you want from those drippings, scrape down your pan, add that to your gravy, and there you go. Make that a day ahead of time. Plus, if you get it wrong, guess what? You've got time to fix it. Thin it out, whatever you need to do. Mashed potatoes are not particularly great the next day, so I would make those day ahead of time. However, they're really great when they sit around. So if you're having people over for dinner at 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock, make them in the morning. That's fine. Just put them in a warm oven, 200 degrees, whatever you got, or put them on top of the stove. Like, they last really well and they hold up, but they don't refrigerate and come back the next day. They don't sort of revive well, but they stay warm for a long time and maintain their richness. However, those starches are going to continue to sort of puff up. So you might need to add a little bit of warm liquid to it just at the very end before you serve it. Easy enough. So I've talked through a lot of those salads, those soups, things like that are very easy, wonderful to make a day ahead of time, 2 days even ahead of time, where all you've got is just a proposal of just warming them up. So there you go, Julia. The stuffing can be made ahead of time because you're going to, I think, throwing that under the broiler day of. So yeah, make that a day ahead of time, put it in your casserole dish, add some more water the next day when you pull it out of the refrigerator, throw it under the broiler to get some good chunkiness to it. Yeah. So, all right. We've answered a bunch of questions. We have a couple more here. And you know what? You don't just have me today, though. You've got the whole Rouxbe team. So I'm going to take a break and I'm going to invite some of our friends at Rouxbe, some of the other instructors who are going to come on. They've all recorded little messages of tips and techniques for you. So Patrick, if you would please roll that for us, and I'll see you back here in about 7 minutes or so once you learn from all of our other esteemed chefs. Cheers.
Hey everyone, Chef Shar here, getting ready for the holidays with 3 quick tips. The first one is get your grandmother's china out of the cabinet and wash it at least a week in advance. This way you'll have nice, clean, dust-free dishes. The next thing is, if you're having a buffet, have some cards out with the name of the dish and its ingredients. Make sure the font is big enough for anyone to read and understand. And lastly, but not least, head to the dollar store or wherever and get some to-go dishes so that you can pack a beautiful dinner for everyone to take home and remember the fun they had at your table. Happy holidays.
So for the holiday season this year, maybe it might be time to give yourself a bit of a break, bring in some friends and family to help maybe carry the load, do some of the shopping for you or help with some of the cooking. This year is a year when I'm not going to be taking on quite as much. I've got some extra things that I've been working on. So I'm feeling okay about asking others for a little bit of help and just kind of breaking it up a bit. So I'm looking forward to that this year. Even maybe learning a few new recipes, trying some new dishes. But in terms of my timing, just trying to step back just a little bit, not trying to overachieve and have so many different options or things so well planned out, and just try to bring the stress down a little bit.
So when trying a new recipe, you want to ensure that you are reading the instructions more than one time. So when you're first looking at a recipe, you're going through that recipe, you're understanding, the equipment, the ingredients that you need, and you're also taking your time to really ensure that you're taking account all of the variations and things that could potentially happen with that recipe if you don't have a particular piece of equipment or if you don't have that particular ingredient and you need to make substitutes. With anything that you're doing that's new, you want to give yourself the patience in understanding and learning that and really approaching reading your recipe from a space of learning so that with the finished outcome, you aren't too hard on yourself and you're really ensuring that you're doing everything that you can with the recipe. So at the end of the day, when you're trying new things, especially when it's getting close to the holidays, make sure that you're reading your recipes and you're going through them more than once. You're holding yourself accountable to anything that can happen with that recipe, whether it's the finished product or being able to have those particular ingredients and that particular equipment that you need to be successful.
All right, so my tip is actually a pretty practical one for if you're having a plant-based guest over for a holiday. Now, a lot of people, if you don't usually eat plant-based, might kind of freak out a little bit hosting and you're actually having somebody that eats 100% plant-based over. Now, it's actually just a couple little switches to your normal meal can actually make a wonderful difference for any of your plant-based guests. First of all, remember that a lot of plant-based people are used to eating a lot of side dishes for the holidays, which is okay, but you do need to remember to be able to make a lot of your side dishes plant-based as well. So you can still do, your mashed potatoes, but maybe not add cream or butter to them. Instead, using a plant-based butter might be a better option for that. You can do other things on those sides too, like roasting vegetables with thyme, maybe a green bean casserole, but instead of using like the cream of mushroom, you can do a vegan cream of mushroom instead, which would be great. Those green bean casseroles are always a favorite, so just making a little tweak to that's fantastic as well. Now, if you really want to go to impress, you should actually just up the game a little bit by making a main dish that's a plant-based dish to be able to go along with any other thing that you're serving too. Now, that could be anything from a vegan shepherd's pie to a lentil loaf. Lasagnas are always popular as well. Doing a pot pie might be a wonderful thing to do. One of my favorites that I personally do is a mushroom Wellington, which we'll actually give you the link to right here, which is it's a showstopper. So a lot of these can be dressed up to just look fantastic and really get tons of flavor added to every single meal. And you will find that anybody who might not be plant-based is going to enjoy those dishes just as much as the people that are coming as plant-based. So when you do have people coming over that are plant-based for your meal, just remember not to be scared. Just kind of keep in the regular lanes that you're used to. Just make tiny alterations to the dishes to be able to make them plant-based for everybody, so everybody can come together for the holidays and enjoy them.
Hi, everybody. Ho, ho, ho. It's almost holiday season out there. It's Dr. Deb. I'm a nutritionist and a chef. And one thing that I can recommend to you to have a really spectacular holiday season has less to do with food than it does to do with you. My goal and my hope for you is that you honor yourself in your food choices this holiday season, and don't beat yourself up if you eat more of something that you didn't want to eat. It's okay. Maybe let's look for being 10% less stressed. So I like to give everybody this chocolate, this homemade chocolate that I make, and one type of cookie. And I've been doing it for 20 years and everyone looks forward to it. Then I'm not running around everywhere. So one go-to recipe that really works for you, that shows your love through food and honoring yourself and taking some breaths. If you find yourself holding your breath, take 3 breaths before you eat. If you can just do that one thing, you can enjoy your holidays more.
My tip today is to prepare a list to guide your mise en place in your cooking process. And let me give you an example. This is a list that I prepared here. And this is what I would do when I would put together, appetizers, main items, and then a sweet item, just in the order of the menu that I'm preparing. And as you can see, there are some things like soaking of beans that can be done ahead of time. And so go ahead and check those off your list. Perhaps it's cooking of potatoes, again, things that can be done hours or even a day or two ahead of time, depending on what you're making. I also include sometimes what time to put something in the oven so that I don't have to think about it. It's in front of me and I can do it very quickly. And in this way, this sort of a list will guide you and will act as a communication tool for anyone that's helping you in the kitchen. At a glance, they'll know what has not been started, what's in progress, and what has been completed. Enjoy.
Treat the Thanksgiving holiday as an easy spring cleaning. Check your ingredients, toss anything that's expired, sniff your spices. Also, have a plan B, because something will likely not happen the way you expect it to happen. If your pie didn't set, serve it in a bowl and you've got a mousse or a custard. And make sure to have fun, have food that everyone, people with dietary considerations, can enjoy.
All right. It was so nice to hear from so many of our friends. I hope you got some good tricks, tips, and techniques out of that. All of that I thought is very good ideas, especially around the planning ahead of time, especially because, planning ahead of time and getting yourself set up for things, it's been shown that, 70% of the happiness or the joy, maybe even more, that we get out of vacations comes actually from the planning of it. So thinking ahead to something that is joyous and fun and wonderful that we're looking forward to is, to me, that is at least half the fun, right? So sit down, have a glass of wine, really enjoy that process of coming into a plan. And then, of course, enjoy the process of cooking because you've set yourself up for success. All right, so also from Julia G, trying to accommodate lots of dietary restrictions. 2 guests are newly dairy and gluten-free, as well as following bland high pH diet for GI issues. All right, well, it sounds like this is going to be a learning curve holiday for you. You know what? There's quite a lot of great resources here on Rouxbe to follow and manifest some really great dishes with all of those restrictions on them. I wouldn't even call them restrictions so much as I would say directions, right? Because take that as a means to just go find the inspiration for them rather than telling you something you can't do. Take them as, opportunities to point you in new directions, right? You're just going to discover new recipes there. So following, the high pH as well as dairy and gluten-free. Dairy, especially, dairy people tend to look at as, I think people use dairy as a crutch, quite honestly, in a lot of cooking. Are mashed potatoes really delicious with a whole lot of cream and butter? Well, duh, of course they are, right? But can they be absolutely delicious with a good addition of just the potato cooking water, where you take potatoes and when people make mashed potatoes, they peel their potatoes, they put them in a pot, and then they fill the pot, here are your potatoes, and they fill your pot all the way full of water, right? Well, guess what potatoes do when you cook them in water? They leach their flavor into the water, right? So instead of adding this much water, all of which you're going to pour down the drain, add just enough water to barely cover them. Why? Because then you're going to have some pretty intensely potato flavored water, right? And that can become your mixing medium with some olive oil, maybe some lemon juice or something in there to heighten those flavors if you're not using a whole lot of salt. But there's ways to really make these dishes good. Just thinking about the techniques. How do you make those mashed potatoes as potato-y as possible, which, is delicious very much in its own right. Yeah, of course, cream and butter is delicious, but making a really delicious potato-y potato dish is also great. So think about a couple of ways to incorporate some new ideas that way, and I think you're going to have a real fun time this year and beyond. So thanks for coming to this event, and I appreciate you sharing with us. From Dr. KK, how do you keep chipmunks out of my garlic? I'm losing my love for Chip and Dale. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. So interesting. I have never had an issue with this. Maybe it's because chipmunks up here have so much else to get after. So I'm wondering if it's actually chipmunks or maybe voles that you've got, because voles I know can be pretty annoying for garlic farmers in that they basically disrupt the bulbing of it more so than eat it, because nothing really eats garlic because of that high allicin content to it. So I'm curious if chipmunks are actually getting after your garlic, because as I said, we got plenty of chipmunks around here, more so than I wish for, because you know what, they just get kind of really annoying early in the morning when they're just out there doing that chip sound, chip, 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 chip. Anyway, I try not to get annoyed at nature being nature. So chipmunks, we love you. So voles, I don't know, but the only thing I would think to do is maybe spread some used cat litter around the boxes as a perimeter. I think that might work better than other predator or maybe fox urine is a commonly sold at, you go to Ace and True Value and get that in concentrated form. Beware when you open it. But using that as a perimeter spray can often keep small rodents away. I mean, that is its purpose. So I would think about it that way. And also those natural things tend not to disrupt the organic nature or the goodness in your soil. So there you go. Other than that, then of course there's the rather less humane ways of setting some traps, relocating, if you will. But yeah, curious about that. Never had any issues. Cheers. Well, thanks for joining, Doctor. Appreciate you. And I love anybody that farms garlic. I'm curious what varieties you farm. So I'm up in the north here, so I farm only hardneck garlic. And at this point, I've got my own land race because I've been culling my own seed for about 10 years now. So I've got cloves. I do like a German extra hardy type variety, or music is the other one. And I've sort of selected those two together, and I get big, beautiful cloves that are like 4 to 6 cloves per head. Oh, I just love it. I just got 1,200 heads in the ground, and looking forward to having that out. The other thing that I really love about being a garlic farmer is when I go to plant my garlic, when I separate out those heads to get the individual cloves that I want to plant, there's a bunch of cloves that aren't quite up to snuff. They aren't the biggest cloves on the bulb, so I'm not going to get a big, nice, robust bulb from them. So I'll cull those out. And like this year, I ended up with like 100 or so cloves that just didn't quite meet standard. So what I did is I just made a giant batch of garlic confit, and it's been simmering away on my stove now for several hours. I just put in a giant tub of olive oil, all that garlic, several bay leaves, which I also buy by the pound, so I kind of use them by the handful, and just simmered that away. And that's going to sit in my refrigerator for the next 3 months or so. And it's going to go into my mashed potatoes. It's going to be the oil that I use to drizzle onto my roasted root vegetables before they go into the oven. It's going to go into salad dressings. I'm going to saute my kale with it. I'm just going to eat it by the spoonful. Yeah, I'm going to sop it up with bread, etc. I'm going to mash in some smoked anchovies into it and some fresh chopped mint and parsley with some chili flake and a couple cracks of black pepper. Put that out there with some bread as a little appetizer for people when they walk in the door on Thanksgiving. Woo! Right? Hey, that's a really good use of culled garlic, and it's one of my favorite things that I get, right around this time of year every year when I plant my harvest. So there you go. Oh, you do Russian, red, and elephant. Nice. Very cool. That's a nice mix. Spicy, and then the spicy of the Russian and the reds, both very spicy, and then the elephant, nice nuanced, mild garlic. I love it. Very cool. All right, LEW. Hello. I would like some advice on one-pot holiday meals. Oh, that's pretty cool. So you heard me explaining that whole butternut squash thing earlier, right? That soup with the chunks of it in there, with the fennel and the almonds, the fennel seeds, throw in a bunch of bay leaves. So try this. If you're doing a turkey, go out and get a bunch of turkey legs. Make a nice broth out of that. Very, very slowly simmer it with a whole lot of bay leaves in there. Whatever spices you want, maybe a couple of knobs of ginger, some star anise pods in there to give it a nice real nuance, maybe even a cinnamon stick or some cloves, not to make it pumpkin pie sweet here, but just to add some real depth and richness, nuance to it. So then you've got your turkey legs, which you basically braised in water with these spices in order to make a turkey broth, but also your cooked chicken or you cooked turkey legs, right? So take the turkey legs out, cool them down, shred them into nice big pieces, make that butternut squash soup, as I explained it to you before. Maybe add in some other veg in there, throw in some diced up red skin potatoes with their skin on for added color. Let's see, what else could we add in there? Throw in some whole Brussels sprouts. Get those tiny little ones that are so sexy that just make you want to roast them and just eat them, right? Throw some of those in there whole. So they braise down. Use your turkey broth strained of your spices as the base of your soup. And then when the whole thing is done, you take your turkey legs, shredded meat, add that back in there, a nice drizzle of olive oil over the top, maybe even some almond oil or something like that. Chop fresh herbs, big giant loaf of bread on the side, sliced up, toasted, rubbed with some fresh garlic as soon as it comes out of the oven. So slice a clove of garlic in half, toast off your bread. As soon as it comes out, just rub the cut side of that garlic on there, just 2 or 3 passes. You get this incredible, lovely, fresh aroma of the garlic on the bread without any of that character of the sort of the chunky character of the garlic. Man, you've got a really nice one-pot meal that is very seasonal, that is evocative of the sort of traditional meal itself, but there you go. And it's pretty cost-effective too, and dang delicious. There you go. Cheers. Hope you enjoy that. That's a kind of fun idea. I just came up with that one. So, yeah, appreciate you joining us today. From Cynthia D, thank you. Could I use a replacement for tapioca flour in a recipe for chocolate mousse? It's a Blue Zone recipe that does use tofu. Wishing you a wonderful Thanksgiving. Well, thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate the well wishes and right back at you. Unfortunately, I am going to say that I don't really know about that. I'm not so much of a baker to begin with. I don't really like desserts unless I can cook them. It's just kind of who I am. Anyway, I don't have much of a sweet tooth, but there are members of our Rouxbe family that are world-class experts on this. In fact, they've kind of written the book on it. So I'm going to ask that Patrick, in the background here of our event, forward that question on to our experts at Rouxbe, and they will get back to you via email to answer your question. Cheers. Thank you for that. I'm sorry that I can't answer it in person for you, but I hope that you enjoyed the rest of this event, Cynthia. Appreciate you joining. Judith T, are those preserved lemons on your top shelf? I'm thinking of adding some to the oyster dressing. Good for you. Could be delicious to serve with my porchetta style char. Absolutely. So yes, those are preserved lemons. Those are actually preserved Meyer lemons that I do about once a year. I haven't been using them as much as I'd like to have been, and I can't really tell you why. I don't know. But you just given me inspiration to go back to them. So yes, I've got preserved lemons up there. I've got preserved lemons over there. Those were made with a lot of fennel seeds. That with allspice berries, juniper berries, and bay leaves in that one. And then the one that I've been using over here is with fennel seeds. I think I've got some star anise in there as well. So yeah, that's a fun thing to do on a cold December day or sometime after the holiday, in January, where you're just sitting around and you're like, I want a project to do because I can't be outside. Well, I go to the store and get a bunch of bags of Meyer lemons, which is my favorite citrus there is. So intoxicating, just that aroma, that gin-like aroma of the mandarin crossed with the lemon. Oh, so good. So good. So then I make just a big batch of those and I use them throughout the year. So in terms of that porchetta dish, absolutely. Dice up a bunch of those, throw them into that marinade, even mash up some of the flesh, which is really super salty, and use that to season it instead of adding salt to it. So you get even more of that unctuous flavor, but also the acidity from the flesh in there. Be careful with it. It can get overwhelming pretty quick, but man, is it good. Also, throw it into some gravy, preserved lemons in like a traditional turkey gravy for, oh man, so good. Again, throw in some mint, maybe a little bit of ground coriander in there. You get this sort of really super sexy, sultry North African flavors going on. Yeah, hey, it's just a roast turkey, right? But hey, look at this awesome gravy I've got. You know what? We're in America, right? We're giving thanks to all that we have here, including our neighbors, right? And our neighbors in this wonderful, multicultural society that we have. I don't see anything wrong with mixing in a little bit of all that they have brought to our wonderful community. So give thanks for everyone, right? And include flavors, whatever you want in there. Any great scallop potato recipes from Rouxbe? I've seen a lot of my news feed, but worry about the heavy cream replacement and their outcome. Interesting. So great question. Thank you. I love scallop potatoes, mostly, I got to say, mostly because of the heavy cream, because it's so tasty. That's one of those dishes that I do like, layered with Parmesan, heavy cream, potatoes, repeat. So you can certainly use any replacement. So in our family, we really don't eat a lot of dairy. I use butter. My wife does not eat dairy, but butter is okay for her. It's really the milk solids and the proteins that bother her. So we don't use milk. We use almond milk in our house. And I've made scalloped potatoes with almond milk, not the sweetened kind. So it's the original unsweetened, to good effect. So really any liquid is going to do just fine because it's the potato starch that's thickening the liquid, not the other way around. Heavy cream starts off thick, so it has, it has a shorter distance to go in terms of getting to that thickness, that binding thickness there. So water works just fine. Scalloped potatoes, what do you get? You get a very potatoy scalloped potato dish. Cool, right? So mix in whatever flavors you want throughout that dish, whether it's, between some of those layers, you're mixing in a little bit of lemon zest, you're mixing in a little bit of ground fennel seeds or whole fennel seeds, some chili flakes. I'm looking over here at my spice rack. Throw on, a dusting of mace on one layer. Oregano, I'm thinking just onion powder. There's lots of different spices in there that used judiciously are going to add such depth and richness and nuance to it that you're not going to miss that cream. I would pick your potatoes wisely. I think an Idaho potato russet is fine. I think there's some other varieties that you might find, maybe a red skin, especially a more starchier red skin, if you can, instead of the waxy ones. But a starchier red potato that you could find, keep the skin on so you've got some real visual appeal to this. Put in some sage leaves, something like that. That's going to add also sort of a layered visual to this while also adding flavor. One thing that I have done in my scalloped potatoes before is in the cream, and I actually tend to use half and half. which works just fine, but cuts down some of the fat. Then my wife just doesn't eat them, and that's fine because she doesn't really like potato dishes anyway, even though I'm also a potato farmer. So my boys and we eat a lot of potatoes around the house. Imagine that. Anyway, I take a can of smoked anchovies. And any of you who have joined me before know, whoa, hi there. Wow, the camera is following me. Sorry about that. You just got a vision of my dish pit over here in my window. So that was the sink that I had to fix today and replumb, which I did successfully. Anyway, any of you who have joined me before know that I am a huge fan of anchovies. They add incredible depth and richness of flavor to things without necessarily, they don't make them fishy. Anchovies, like salt and lemon juice, make things taste more like they are. They add depth and richness, umami. They fill in the background of flavor for things. So I've actually made a cream out of the anchovies in half and half, just sort of mashed it all together. Woo, man, those are the best scalloped potatoes I've ever had. Maybe not to your dietary needs or preferences, but hey, try that out if you're curious about it. So let's see, last question, and I do have to go after this. So from Cynthia D, thank you to all the Rouxbe chefs for getting on this event and giving their advice. Very nice. You are so very welcome. Yeah, oh, Patrick threw up a link there to my friends at Scordo. Scordo is a spice company here in Maine. Some people that I really, really like. I admire them and am happy to work with them. I've made actually a couple of spice blends with them, wine seasonings, which is salts to season your food with, to bring it closer to whatever wine you're drinking. So we've got Merlot, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Noir, Cabernet, Chardonnay, etc. So I had actually asked him ahead of time to put that in there. If you're looking for a nice holiday gift, a host gift for anybody who's maybe hosting you for the holidays, etc., check these out. They're on scordo.com. The link is right there. I would appreciate that because it's a product that we have partnered with them to make. But also, if you're going to be using spices, use good spices, please, right? I mean, they're going to have such an impact in your dish, right? Use good ones. Like you go to the store and you hand pick every other ingredient that you're going to put on your table, right? So maybe pay a little attention to the spices that you're using. There's some really great quality stuff out there that you can order. Scordo.com. Burlap and Barrel is another really great one because guess what? Spices age, and they kind of age out of their beauty and the eloquence of their flavor. So buy some new spices for yourself this holiday season. Make that a treat that you sort of re-up your pantry. Throw out all the stuff that's, a decade or more old, etc., and buy some new ones. So anyway, check that out. Thanks for listening to that. I didn't mean to give you like a sales pitch at the end of it, but that is a good tip to just always be aware of the quality and age of all of the ingredients that you're using, from the oils on your shelf to the vinegars that you use to the spices. And with that, I'm going to say goodbye, and how grateful I am for you, for all of you, for joining us here today, for being part of the Rouxbe family. But also just thank you for being a cook. Because as I said at the start of this, cooking is an act of love. It's an act of kindness. And that is what the world needs a whole lot more of these days. So the fact that you are interested in doing that, it means that you are interested in caring for and giving kindness to those around you. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Hey, I love you so much. Spread the love. Join us again at another Rouxbe event soon. Thanks.